We love naming things. Life has become, for human beings, essentially no more than a naming experience or plethora of experiences. We love to name, we love concepts. Life has become a concept. Anything that we're interested in, we try to put it in the cellophane, freeze-packed, vacuum-sealed world of naming. That way we convince ourselves that we have this, we have procured this, we have taken possession of this, we have turned this into an asset. We have it, we've mastered it. And everything about life demonstrates that that is never the case. That we can say whatever we like, but nothing's changed. A human being is such a great opportunity, an opportunity of growth. And to be born as a human being, especially at a time where the Buddha's teachings are available that allow us to break free from those silly hang-ups we have, which can take us a whole lifetime. I mean, we've done that countless times. But we don't recall them. We don't recall the disappointments we've dealt with right at the end of each life. We don't recall those. And at the end, because of the desire to re-experience the pleasures of life, to make it work, quote unquote, the next time around, has been dragging us on a noose, on a hook, from life to life. But we have a huge opportunity as human beings to release ourselves from that. But what is that? That itself is the first noble truth that Lord Buddha talks about, that so many of us are experts at evading, at avoiding, at minimizing in importance. Because I have this thing that I'm doing, this is more important right now. I'll get to that later. And that is what we see, and we have seen again and again, in the form of avidya, the willful ignoring on our part. But you ignore what? You ignore the fact that there is this terrible discomfort. There's this pain that I'm running away from, I'm avoiding by going after that, which is the opposite, we convince ourselves, in being. Opposite of what? The discontent. Meanwhile, our hair is on fire, as Lord Buddha says. The only way that we can reduce, let alone get rid of suffering, is by carefully looking at our patterns of behavior. That's why we study the Dhamma. That's why we look into the Dhamma with more scrutiny, with more care, trying to see if we're missing anything. But that requires us to be humble. It requires us to be students, first and foremost. What is a student? Well, for starters, the student is someone who seeks answers to questions they have. So essentially, they are curious, not for the sake of curiosity. That's it. No. They're not students in the sense that they want to look for ideas. So collectors of ideas are not necessarily students. Because in order for you to collect, it means that you need to have a lid on the receptacle within which you put the data, the knowledge you collect. The lid itself is conceit. I have this much. This is my teacher. These are my teachers. These are the teachings. These are my beliefs. These are the things that I know. A true student is someone who doesn't say that, who cannot say that. Why? Because the only way they could know is if they actually taste Nibbana. After which, they don't need to go around telling people they know. Their behavior says it. The introduction of the new Dhammic life reveals so much about their internal metabolism, if you will. Spiritual metabolism. It says so much, while at the same time, their abstinence from previous engagements also reveals a lot. In essence, in English, we could call this personality development of the person, of the individual, towards being a Dhammic person. Dhamma is not information that simply remains as information or one collects. That would be, in Pali, the term is upadhi. Upadhi is an asset, is accumulation of things. They could be physical, of course, solid things that you can, tangible things, or they could be non-tangible, intrinsic. I'm a master at this, I do this, I can attain this state or that state. Or that's my personality. All these are assets. Nibbana is the absence of these assets through and through. So anything that we latch onto will obstruct us from the experience of release from that suffering, which is Nibbana. So Nibbana cannot become an asset. It cannot become a possession. It cannot become a thing for you to own. Like the t-shirts you have, or the clothing you have, like the experiences even. If it is already a valid experience, then it's an important experience, it's a transformative experience, then it must have done its job. That's the end of that. We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to be referring back to it and anchoring ourselves somewhere by saying, yeah, do you recall that? Yes, yes. So what we have then is this preponderance, this proliferation of avidya, this moha, this delusion that we have. And that's another reason why we need to go back to the Dhamma to really put our understanding to the test. And whatever cannot withstand that test needs to be dropped. And that's a very important quality for a student to have. Otherwise, you're not a student because you're claiming to be a teacher. In fact, you're beyond. You're beyond. And that is wrong because you're still going to be sitting in the cesspit of your own ideas, the namings that I was referring to. That's at the bottom. That's the desire, the name. Well, where is it coming from? The sense of I, the sense of me, the sense of mine, the conceit, am. I am different. We, collectively, those who think like me, this, that, we are different. This is avidya. But we're so frozen in avidya because of all the other factors that we bring in to validate or to convince us that we're not, that we are on the path, that we know, that we are practicing the Dhamma. But we're frozen because there's no growth. Two things are necessary, sati and sampajanya. They wedge you out of the ditch of ignorance. They pull you out from the frozen state that is willful ignoring, which is the absence of sati, which is the absence of yoniso manasikara. That's the only way that suffering can be removed from our lives. The only way. There cannot be. There isn't. In any of the suttas, you carefully look throughout the Nikāyas, all of the teachings of Lord Buddha and his Arya Savakas, his noble disciples, the Arahants. Nowhere do you see that it is a matter of collecting more Dhamma, more information that can somehow reduce your suffering. So what is necessary? Seeing is necessary. Seeing what this teaching is telling, what it's trying to capture, what it's trying to show you, the person. And for that, you don't even need as many suttas. You can just need a single verse or one sutta, one message. Venerable Sariputta heard only one line of the verse, the first part of Venerable Assaji's verse, which he tried to paraphrase from a teaching that he had heard from Lord Buddha. And he attained Sotapatti, Venerable Sariputta. That means the person must have already, whether they knew it or not, been so primed. They're so ready. They're at the cusp. They are at the tip of the arrowhead. In working with one of the Samyutta Nikāya suttas that I was translating this week, there's a dialogue between Lord Buddha and a deva. And it's a superlative deva, meaning they have knowledge and understanding of the Dhamma, and they are referring back to the practice of the Bhikkhu, of the person who is true practitioner, Bhikkhu or otherwise. And Lord Buddha's statement is, it's like someone who is about to be skewered with a spear. Or to be cut down, struck down with a sharp blade. Or someone whose hair is on fire, whose beard is on fire, whose clothing is on fire. Can that person postpone, delay being present to the experience? that compels you to appreciate life as a human being. That brings you to the present. That brings you to what really, really, truly matters. And what matters are not the namings, the concepts, the ideas, because you have just been brought down to reality. That means the person, whatever Dhamma they come across, they're going to soak it up like a dry sponge. Many people are like wet sponges at the bottom of the ocean. How is that wet piece of, let's say, even a cloth, going to soak up anything? Any of the Dhamma? So today's sutta is addressing that. The term in Pali is Assutava. Assutava, sutta means listening or learning. In this case, Assutava is the unlearned, excuse me, Assutavā Sutta from the Samyutta Nikāya 12.61. So we go back to the connected discourses, or the kindred discourse. I like to use the connected for Samyutta. And it is from the Nidana Vagga Samyutta, which is the greater collection on causation, Nidana, and then from the subsection, which are, again, Nidana Samyutta. And then from within that, we have the Mahavagga group. And in there, the first of that, the first of those suttas in that bundle is the Assutavā Sutta, which is translated as the unlearned in the Dhamma. Unlearned in the Dhamma. So it is not enough to be breathing and call yourself a human being. It is not enough to go to work, to job, to take care of a loved one or more, and tell yourself that you are fulfilling the maximum that you can. Why? Because you still have to eat, right? So it's not just a matter of breathing, it's a matter of drinking, it's a matter of eating, it's a matter of resting, it's a matter of working, it's a matter of all these things. What tends to happen with many is they pick out a compartment within those fields of, I guess, areas of endeavor, compartments of their lives, and they say, that's it, that's it. And they start to chip away things that they consider to be not as important. We each have our own tricks, the convincing tactics we use upon ourselves. Meanwhile, somehow still perpetuating this idea, this imperceptible presence, nevertheless it's there, of permanency. It's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Well, there you go. If you were struggling with the idea of anatta, the lack of substantial, solid me, there it is. You've been perpetuating it throughout your life, that there is this me that I'm carrying it from here to there. And that is what we carry over to the next life. Why or how? With the desire, the craving, or the wanting. Well, where does the want come? Well, if we narrow it down, if we break it down to its nuts and bolts, as they say, when you haven't lived, really? When you haven't truly experienced something. Well, how can you not experience something when you are not present to it? The person being skewered with a spear is very much present. The person who's trying to extinguish the fire on their head and they're smelling the hair burning. If you ever smelled hair burning, it's not the pleasant smell, right? Especially if it's yours. It's real. You cannot afford to miss out. You have to do something about it. You are present. You are fully packed inside that moment. You're experiencing it. You cannot afford to miss out. And that is one good way to understand sampajanya, because you become completely, fully aware. And Lord Buddha says, without that, it's not going to be possible. You see it in Anapanasati Sutta, you see it in Satipatthana Sutta, the Mahasatipatthana, of course. Whether coming and going, stretching the arm, flexing the arm, turning this way or that, the person is aware. That is practicing or being within the confines of the deathless. Amata dhatu. You are in that presence. Why? Because sati and sampajanya are with you. When you basically, this then leads us to conclude, right? That if the person is fully there with sati and sampajanya, can there be craving? Can there be latching on to the other? Anyata the other, the becoming of the other. Could that even come into question, into a conversation? You don't have time for that. Why? Because you're fully present. And this is living without the lid of conceit when you are being exposed to the Dhamma. Because another thing that the lid does is it doesn't allow the rain to come in. It doesn't allow whatever is being poured into it to really go into the receptacle. So many of us are just empty shells. Even if we're sitting there year after year, day after day, listening to Dhamma talks. That's why you had many, many, many people sitting in front of Lord Buddha, listening to Dhamma talks, some of them in robes, and nothing happened. The quintessential example that Lord Buddha gives about the spoon never tasting the soup. There's a whole collection of spoons. Let's not be one, because this sutta was given to people who are listening. And if there were no need for Lord Buddha, meaning there were people who were actually listening truly to absorb and not collect more ideas, thinking that that is the Dhamma, Lord Buddha would never taught this. So, let us begin. So, from the Samyutta Nikāya, SN 12.61, Assutavā Sutta, the Unlearned in the Dhamma. This is what I personally heard. At one time, when the Blessed One was living at the monastery offered by Anathapindika at Jeta's Park in Savatthi, he addressed the bhikkhus by saying, Bhikkhus, there might come a time when the unlearned in the Dhamma, the Putujjana, would come to experience revulsion towards the physical body that is made of the four prime or primary elements, as he becomes disenchanted with it, disinterested in it, while desiring to be freed from it. And what is the reason for this? It is because he would see that eventually this body that is made up of the four prime elements does and will deteriorate, weaken, and lose its vigor, as it will decline and need to be moved around and finally to be disposed of and cremated. So basically, if you're living on this planet, you have a body, and you're going about your business of living a life, these things become quite self-evident. And you see this even statements like this, as far as the disenchantment or the revulsion, or you even have in the Christian or Jewish, I guess the Bible and other religions also, things that go along with, oh, it's all empty, right? King Solomon, we used to say that, right? I think it was in Psalms or Proverbs or whatever it is called, but basically it is emptiness. All things are empty type of a thing. Who says that? The king is saying this? A king who had everything? Yeah, because eventually you see that greed, that lust with which you were approaching this sense object, suddenly it's dissipated. But guess what? 5-10 minutes later, you're going to have it again. So you realize that you're just a hamster in a wheel, going about crazily. And then you look around, all the other people who are seeking to have those sensual pleasures, they're trying to get to your position, thinking that they are going to get fulfilled if they're in your position, but you yourself are empty. What does that make the person feel? Terrible, ultimately. So essentially, they're going to come out and say, well, this whole thing is empty. But that doesn't mean that there is wisdom. Lord Buddha is saying, Putujjana even will get to that conclusion. You might have seen people doing that, saying that, being disgruntled about life or with life because it proved itself to be untrustworthy. And they're at the tail end of life. They are nearing the end of their lives, like in their 90s or close to that. But the body doesn't comply anymore. Yet they have this furnace, this volcano of passion inside still, as if nothing has happened. There's not even a dent on it. Even though they lived their lives, without any sila. They were never fulfilled. It is because he would see that eventually, okay, I read that. In this way, the unlearned in the Dhamma, the Putujjana, might come to experience revulsion towards the physical body that is made of the four prime elements, as he becomes disenchanted with it, disinterested in it, while desiring to be freed from it. Every time we get sick, we want to get a new one, get a replacement. If you have a car and it keeps breaking down and you take it to the mechanic, eventually, naturally, you're going to have the thought, at least, of, I wonder if I can just take it to somebody and just get another one. We have the same attitude towards the body. Well, that happens with everyone near the end of their life. The desire, the imperceptible desire that, can I replace this thing, this old piece of junk? Yeah. Soon enough, you're going to be in diapers again. As a baby this time. Some of us are going to be in diapers even as old people. But that's not what I'm referring to. Why? Because the person has been living like a Putujjana, is a Putujjana. But bhikkhus, when it comes to understanding the heart, the mind, or sense awareness, The unlearned in the Dhamma, the Puthujjana, remains oblivious and ignorant, unable to experience revulsion or become disenchanted, disinterested, nor have the desire to be freed from them. And what is the reason for this? It is because for limitless lives he has been deeply attached to them, looking upon all these as belonging to him, viewing them and himself as one and the same, thus mistakenly believing, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. Because of this, bhikkhus, when it comes to understanding the heart, the mind, or sense awareness, the unlearned in the Dhamma, the Puthujjana, remains oblivious and ignorant, unable to experience revulsion or become disenchanted, disinterested, nor have the desire to be freed from them. Lord Buddha is not talking to a special breed of human beings where this teaching applies to such individuals, such beings, and not to us now living 26 centuries nearly later. This is for everyone. This is for us as much as it was also for the listeners, as Lord, in the presence of Lord Buddha himself, as he spoke these words. Everybody gets disgusted from life. Everybody, sooner or later, at one point or another, but we shake ourselves off of it. We come out of that state. Why? Because we introduce ourselves to something new. Tatra tatra abhinandini, the phrase in Pali goes, here and there, one looks for delighting. One goes on delighting in this or that. We are excellent substituters. We love to substitute. We see suffering, we see discomfort, we like to get rid of it and substitute that with the opposite, something else. In fact, we don't like it to be a repeat of something we've tasted before, even if it's something slightly different. If you ever, well, try this next time you get an email or a text or a SMS message or something. When you notice the mind reaching over for the phone or the computer to see whether you got a notification on something. Chemically, even, we can see that there's a dopamine spike. Why? Because the person has become addicted. We have become addicts. Not just some of us, all of us. But you can break away from that very quickly with the introduction of full awareness, sampajanya. And no, it doesn't have to be something extravagant. You don't have to be looking at sutta after sutta to understand what are the mechanics for having sampajanya. No, you are sitting, you are, let's say with your bare feet touching the ground. Can you tell a difference between the left big toe and the right big toe? Move them. Or how about the outer edge of the right foot versus the inner edge of the left foot? Can you tell a difference? Guess what? You're practicing sampajanya. It won't stay there. In order for it to really develop into proper sampajanya, it has to go deeper with the help of sati, with the help of understanding. Now, as you're doing that, you cannot be dwelling in your worries. You cannot be a captive of your anxieties or what could be the outcome of that email, let's say, that you sent, and you're anticipating a response. You're restless. You cannot be with the 5 hindrances if you are physically present with, let's say, the body. We don't inhabit our bodies. And when things don't work as well as we would like them to, guess what? The person suddenly becomes disenchanted, disgusted, revolved by the body. Why? Because it's no longer serving a purpose. Like that car that's broken down. The loner, as they say, right? But that's not indicative of panya at all. You're simply a sellout to the body. You never were there for the body to begin with. And now, because the body is simply transitory, it's like everything else, it's impermanent, everything that is conditioned, it's going to break down. And there goes the opportunity of a lifetime as a human being, because we have not used it as an anchor point, as grounding for us to really taste the Dhamma, experience the Dhamma. So Lord Buddha is saying, this person is not learned in the Dhamma. He might or she might have a PhD in the Dhamma. They might be a monk or a nun. They might be an upasaka, upasika for many, many decades. Practitioners of meditation. People who can cite references to this or that principle in the Dhamma from any of the suttas and any of the Nikāyas. But they are still very much unlearned. That is why, because it is far easier for the unlearned in the Dhamma, the Patujjana, to look upon his physical body that is made of the four prime elements and witness its changeability and painful unreliability rather than that of the heart. And what is the reason for this? So here is a distinction between what is rupa. When there is a reference to the four prime elements, then we're talking about rupa. The four elements, there's an equal sign between them and rupa, or the first aggregate. Sometimes they're called nama rupa, but rupa is what I want to make that distinction, because sometimes people get confused. So there's that. So we can easily refer to that as the body, the physical body, the form. That's another term for rupa. But then there is the chitta, the heart, or the mind. You can think of it as well, because it can be used interchangeably depending on the context. Chitta, that is, between heart and mind. So Lord Buddha is asking, what is the reason for this? Because even though this body made up of the four prime elements may last for only 1 year, 2 years, 3, 4, 5, or 10 years, or 20, 30, 40, or 50 years, or even for 100 years, or even longer than 100 years, nevertheless, he sees that it is always fleeting, always undergoing change, and is therefore ultimately unreliable. It is quite evident. It's there. Sometimes I would, depending on the student and their capacity to, withstand, I guess, certain things, certain realities about life. Sometimes I would encourage them to go on YouTube, let's say, or Google, or some method like that, and look up before and after images, or video. Video is even better, of famous or celebrity type people that everyone knew about, especially in their younger days, and compare them to their after pictures. Many people do not want to see that picture, the latter. They just want to keep them in mind, the way they looked, how attractive they were before they turned into that shape. We don't like to see that, but it's a fact of life. We all do see that, whether we do like it or not. So there is that, which is quite obvious. No one can deny that. However, Lord Buddha says, as it relates to the heart, the mind, or sense awareness, the unlearned in the Dhamma, the Putujjana, is unable to see how these are ceaselessly changing and never stay the same, arising as one thing in one instance and ceasing as totally something else in another. Thus, he remains clueless as to how this is continuously taking place, day and night. For such a person, the marker that there is this thing called impermanence happening is from one birthday cake to the next, or one big celebration to the next, or one 10-year college reunion celebration to the next. The examples are many, I'm sure, that you can think of. But these become the markers, as it were. But why? What happened in between? The child is no longer a child. They're grown up. They're not that adorable anymore. So you can't carry them, that's for sure. And they smell funny. They don't smell as cute as they did when they were children, when they were babies. You can't stand their voice. Or they talk back at you, let's say, if they're your children or something like that. They have their own opinions, and they're different opinions than yours. They're disrespecting you. But you came out of me. I gave you so much love. What happened? Why did you become like that? Anicca. So many places in the suttas we see how Lord Buddha is guiding the person to realization of Nibbana while starting from basically beginning from the starting point that is perception of anicca. Anicca sanya. That is crucial. But that, of course, we have to use whatever we have, whatever we can, wherever we are, or whatever stage we are on or at in our development of understanding the Dhamma. Fine. So for that, Lord Buddha uses different kind of tools. We've seen Chula Pantaka a few months ago with him trying to strike off the dirt from a piece of white cloth that Lord Buddha had given. You have different bhikkhus, such as the one who was an ex-jeweler, who knew and appreciated beauty, but he was unable to penetrate anicca, and Lord Buddha gives him a flower, a beautiful flower, and it mesmerizes this bhikkhu, and he says, this is now your meditation object, and he goes and sits. But it was created by Lord Buddha's psychic power, so Lord Buddha wills it that flower wilts even in that one sitting, knowing that the mind of that bhikkhu was ready, if he was triggered in the right way. And there was that trigger. So anicca happened quickly in front of his eyes. But it's happening all the time. And by the way, he became an arahant also. So the examples are there, before and after. But it still takes time. It requires a timeline, right? If we're talking about a person's life, that's a huge time span, lifespan. But every moment there is something that's happening that is rising, samudaya, and it is ceasing, it is dying, it is ending, nirodha. Chances are none of us know the day of our death at the end of a life. So instead of waiting, counting the seconds or minutes or years for that moment, for you to be prepared for, there's other moments, other milliseconds that are being wasted. That's another way to waste this human life. So Lord Buddha here is encouraging us to break away from this unlearned state, unlearned in the Dhamma state, and be looking at all these desires that keep popping and dying, just like the breath shows up and then it ceases. Now, the problem is we are lovers of what arises. We're interested in what is being sparked off. We love to see sparks, fireworks, but we don't like to see them dying, fainting into oblivion. But where did it go? And Lord Buddha continues. So it ceases as one thing and it arises as something else. Constantly, it's happening. So if you could just, a good experiment would be if you could get a notebook, something to write with. Telling yourself, I am going to, and in a clock, something that could time you, stopwatch. And it could be as short of a time period as a second, 10 seconds. A minute might be too much. And write down how many thoughts, concepts, ideas popped into your head. Usually it's going to be triggered by what you're picking up from your six senses. Things you saw, usually what you've heard, especially if you close your eyes, but then your mind is going to take off with it. Take it and run with it, as they say. And it's going to make associations. But each of these associations had a beginning point and an end point. Now, this is happening very fast. Very, very imperceptibly, again, fast. And this is another way of experiencing Nibbana we see in the suttas. Meaning, each of these vijnana, they were triggered by having two things specifically. The sense organ, the sense faculty basically of, let's say, and this is not just about the mind, but they all work together, pretty much. So in the case of the eye, there's a functioning eye that is directed in a certain place, in a certain direction, with some attention, and there is an object that is in a visible mode. It's easy for the eye to capture it. Now you put these together with the right circumstances, such as enough lighting, because you might have an object that is visible, but it's dark, and it's a perfectly functioning eye, and it's directed at that object in the darkness, but you still can't see it. It's pitch black. There's absolutely no light whatsoever creeping in. So that still won't cut it. You still need the right environment, right? So with these two items being there, suddenly there will be eye consciousness now. But it was just a very quick spike, a very quick spark. And then the mind takes off. Why? Because now it's noticing details about that object, where it is located, what it reminds you of. But when you clamp them together, when you put them together, all of these different sensations, they basically, each of these will have a moment of arising, which gets us interested, which there is a spark of delight. Tatra tatra bhinandini, here and there delighting. That's why if you've ever done a retreat, or even on your own, in your own room, suddenly opening your eyes, if you were closing them, becomes the biggest celebration for some reason. There's this eagerness to open your eyes, especially when there was a instigating noise outside. Like, I want to find out what happened. Why? Why? There's a tiny little thud somewhere. Oh, I have to open it. Like, what was that? What is that? One time I was doing a walking meditation. It was at a retreat. And there, I had picked an area where there was nothing hanging from the walls, this and that, where I was doing my walking back and forth. And then I noticed something. From the corner of my eye, I noticed that there were some frames of pictures, which I had seen when I was not walking, meditating over there earlier. Then I noticed that there's this desire to want to look up, to see, as if life depended on it. I was like, what is that? Why? Why? All of a sudden, a dot on a wall becomes the most intriguing thing. It is a major cause for delight, for the mind, that is. Why? Because it seeks out re-becoming. How? By the birth, by the arising, by the samudaya, by the origination of a new experience, of a new experience, of a new experience. The mind of a patujana is not interested in the ending of that experience. By the finishing, by the ceasing of that experience. Why? Because craving, as we saw in the Majjhima Sutta, the middle, the seamstress, craving comes in and stitches one moment with the other, one consciousness with the other, and says, no, 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 we are a whole, it's a me, I am this, I am that, I am this, I have this identification, we have this is who I am, this is my culture, this is my language, this is my skin color, these are my ideas. All bogus, all a bunch of lies. So does that mean that the Arahant lives from moment to moment and they're completely disassociated, like almost like mini amnesia? No, they function perfectly. Bhante Nyanda gives a beautiful example. Is like, think of the seamstress stitching up pieces of moments together, right? Like pieces of cloth, the seamstress. And the string with the needle goes in and out, in and out, in and out, stitching up, suturing each piece together. That's how you have continuation of a personality, in your mind at least. That happened, and then that happened, and this is who I am. I'm the bundle of that. Well, in the case of Narahant, the needle of life will go in and out, but there's no string, no threading to tie up these two things together. That means once the needle comes out, these two pieces, these two moments, these two consciousnesses never got attached. They were never stitched together. That's why they can never hold a grudge. Lord Buddha never held a grudge against Devadatta. He saw that he's a harmful being. He protected the Sangha from him. You're wise. But there is no holding on, not even to the Dhamma. Imagine a monkey, bhikkhus, jumping in the forest from one tree to the next, grabbing one branch after another, letting go of one only to go to the next, and then another, then grabbing still another. It is exactly the same with the heart, the mind, or sense awareness, arising in one moment and ceasing in another, continuously, day and night. So when you turn on the light switch and everybody's watching the movie, or somebody turns on the light switch and you're the only one sitting there in the dark watching your movie, suddenly it's revealed. You're now pulled out of that hypnosis. self-hypnosis. That's why many people, especially those who are interested or have been, or they practice or believe they practice, or they are studying the Dhamma, who like to keep themselves in a certain cocoon, visible or invisible, with the same ideas, same inclinations, basically not being challenged, not being scrutinized by outsiders, by especially teachers, or a teacher who comes in, a legitimate teacher, who basing their scrutiny upon the Dhamma. And that's why the student, let's say, has found such a teacher, if they're lucky. The job of the teacher is to shake off the dust. Remember the first statement? Brahma Sahampati. What got Lord Buddha to teach the Dhamma? It was for those with little dust in their eyes. Little dust. If you ever had a grain of dust or sand in your eye, it's painful. And perceptions and concepts are like that for the true learner of the Dhamma. Why? Because you want to clean up the eye as soon as possible from that dust. You don't want to wait for it to turn into a cake. And the teacher is there to help you to do that. Now, many people, the majority of people interested in the Dhamma, sooner or later will find themselves comfortably wanting to go back to that world that they were always interested in. There was never growth in the Dhamma, ever. Why? Because it was simply serving another purpose. Why? Concepts, the ideas, the notions, the perceptions, the namings. This is who I am. I like this. This is my world. And they can come up with all kinds of lies to tell themselves. We do this. We have been doing this for eons until the person desires to break free. That is crucial. And not everyone will pause at that moment and really say, you know, I'm disgusted of myself having done this, having gotten to this point, and again doing the same thing. I need to make a different choice here. That is a true learner, we're going to see in a minute, versus the majority who are not. So this is a call to not just those bhikkhus who are listening to Lord Buddha, because there was always a reason why Lord Buddha gave a certain topic, certain talk on a certain topic, even if they never actually asked a question or asked a specific question. But Lord Buddha knew exactly what was necessary, at least for some of the people, some of the minds really being close to understanding, and they just needed a different twist in the way the Lord Buddha was giving a rendition of the Dhamma. So you can tell yourself all that you want about, yes, I am here, I am there, I am practicing, or drop different terms. And that's a dangerous thing, by the way. It's like somebody who has different psychotic tendencies or personality disorders, so they're not healthy mentally or emotionally. They go and attend classes and they become therapists themselves. I've seen these people. It's terrifying, especially when they do complete the courses and they go and become licensed. All hell's going to break loose. And that's what explains today's society. It's causality, as Lord Buddha says. It's all about causality. So nothing wonderful is going to happen simply because the teaching is there. No, they will use that to their own benefit, for their own interests. And that is the same with the Dhamma. Because the infestations of ignorance inside the heart, which is what Lord Buddha is referring here to, the citta, because the heart is also going to be covered up in the upakileshas, those distortions, and not allow you to see. Even though you might say the words, even though you might think that you're practicing, you're not. Why? Because suffering is there. And to know that you are growing, you need to place yourself in situations where you will be challenged by the Dhamma, not egos, Dhamma, which means the ego has to be dropped, which is really, really difficult for many people, not just lay people, monastics especially. On the other hand, bhikkhus, the learned, noble disciple of the Dhamma, closely pays attention to what is happening and being done in the mind by carefully discerning dependent origination itself in this manner. When this is, it conditions the other to exist. So when this arises, it becomes the cause for the other to arise too, as a result. And in turn, when this is not, it becomes a condition for the other to not exist also. And therefore, when this has ceased, then the other too ceases as a result. Now, the problem is, we like to camouflage even paticcasamuppada. What I mean by that is, we love to cover it up with different frames of pictures and different paraphernalia, different concepts, to keep us in the dark. Or to at least tell us that, yes, I get it. You have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people around the world, Buddhists, who know it by heart. The rundown, as they say, paticcasamuppada. Because of avidya, you have sankaras is, they know it, they front, back. Patiloma, anuloma, they know perfectly well. No, they can memorize it. But when it is happening in life, because this is not intellectual, this is not conceptual, this is happening constantly. For every moment of arising, things were triggered. Before the arising took place, there were other things being triggered, things that were dying, hence there was the new arising. If you were present with the ending, the death, the cessation of the previous moment, you were fully there, the chances of something arising again would have not happened. Or else you would have actually seen it. And then the moments of arising, moments plural, the samudaya moments will become less and less in frequency. There will be less and less agitation in the mind. Because every time you have a samudaya moment, that means the mind is agitated. Because why? Bhinandini, right? Delighting. Or even if it's something that's stressful, still you're agitated. There is a slight delight there somewhere. But because the mind is agitated, because that has convinced us that that is the normal state of the mind, of the heart. No. That's why you have so many people trying and failing in attaining Nibbana. Why? Because they have a misconstrued or a wrong idea, approach in understanding the Dhamma. There needs to be less and less and less and less agitation. That means less and less and less and less concepts and namings and more understanding. In this manner, when ignorance is present, then it becomes the condition for generative causes or habitual drives to exist, sankharas. On account of habitual drives being there, consciousness or sense awareness is brought into existence, vijnana. When consciousness exists, then mentality and materiality, name and form, are given to the condition to be. Because of mentality and materiality being present as causes, the 6 sense spheres arise. As a result of the 6 sense spheres arising, contact becomes possible. And when contact takes place, feelings appear. So this is what I was referring to when I was mentioning the six senses, right? When you're seeing something, all of a sudden it's triggering other things to happen. Now you're hearing things, or you heard something, all of a sudden in your mind you're seeing visuals of that. And it happens so quickly. When there is the desire to re-become, then birth is inevitable. And when there is birth, then aging, illness, and death, along with grieving, wailing, distress, torment, depression, and anguish are sure to follow as a result. After all, this is how the entire mass of suffering starts and continues. When you see this in countless suttas where Lord Buddha explains this, although in brief, but at the end he says, and this is how the whole mass of suffering comes to be, starts and continues, perpetuates. But usually, if not always, Lord Buddha will also give you the opposite of this in reference to the Seika, or the disciple in training, or even the Aseika, or the Arahat. But when ignorance is no longer present and ceases altogether, then the condition necessary for generative causes or habitual drives to exist is no more either. So if you remove the ignorance, and again, ignorance is not some state of being that, albeit ours, it might have been from a past life, where you have no control over. Remember, Venerable Buddha Ghosha has, in his commentary on this, he's mentioned how, and unfortunately we have entire schools of Buddhist thought that were led astray, to this day even, to divide the Paticca Samuppada into 3 lifetimes. That is complete false, completely, because it has no support at all throughout the suttas. Lord Buddha never said that. Plus, the Dhamma is akaliko, it is timeless. So it doesn't have past, present, and future lifetimes squeezed into this thing called dependent origination. Why? Because if it's in the past that we're talking, then it's no longer in your control, in your hand. You cannot do anything about it. So if avidya is something pertaining to the past, you cannot do anything about it. Similarly with the sankharas. That we need to put a spotlight on, because the Dhamma is akaliko, it is sanditthiko, it is directly visible here and now. How can you then remove the ignorance? Remember, willful ignoring is how I like to make it more relevant, become more relevant to us. Willfully ignoring is basically avijja. The person chooses to stay in the status quo. That's why the person is saying, I'm fine where I am. I don't like to be challenged. I'll keep the Dhamma the way I understand it. Even though I am not going to be totally happy, but I am happy in the familiar. That's a stagnant state. That is a place of dukkha, ultimately, because the outside factors, sooner or later, they're going to fall, the support system. The Dhamma cannot be supported by outside supporting systems, because it doesn't need them. The image that comes to mind is like an elephant that is trying to wear an elephant suit to feel like it's an elephant. It's an elephant already. It doesn't require any other ideas. The Dhamma itself is self-sustaining. Now, the person has to understand this. Then the condition for necessary for generative causes or habitual drives to exist is no more either. On account of the habitual drives no longer being present, sankharas, consciousness or sense awareness ceases and exists no more. When consciousness is no more, then mentality and materiality do not have the condition to be. Because if you recall from previous suttas we've done, the bundle of reeds, for example, Vijnana is on one side, Namarupa is on the other. They are necessary for the birth of this new being, the new you. Vijnana and Namarupa have come together, and that's how the person is alive, is born. Now, sometimes one of these, let's say if one of them you take out, the other will fall as well. You cannot have Vijnana without Namarupa. You cannot have Namarupa without Vijnana, the two bundles of bamboos or reeds. We've seen this in also when Lord Buddha was instructing Venerable Ananda, and also Venerable Sariputta was instructing Venerable Ananda on this. When consciousness is no more than mentality, material do not have the condition to be, and because of Namarupa having ceased to be as causes, the six sense spheres also end and cease, because the six senses, the salayatanam, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind, they require Namarupa. Without Namarupa, they don't exist. It doesn't work. Or it malfunctions. The being doesn't function fully. And when contact, as a result of the sixth sense existing no more, contact becomes impossible, and it too ceases. And when contact thus no longer takes place, feelings also disappear and cease. Because of the absence of feelings, craving does not happen, and thus ceases to be altogether. On account of craving's end, grabbing too simply, that's upadana, simply dissolves and is no more. As a result of the ending of grabbing, or upadana, now there is no longer any desire for re-becoming. One of the other definitions of upadana is also a fuel source. It's not just to grasp, to cling on to grab. That's one definition of upadana. But the other definition is the very fuel. Fuel for what? If you remove the fuel source of a fire, the fire dies, basically. Same thing. When you remove the upadana, the clinging, then there is no becoming. The person no longer has the desire for, there is no bhava. Because if there is bhava, then it means there will be birth. It might not be so quick because the person is trying the being is trying so hard, the desire itself to trying to cling. Remember the Vijnana and Namarupa? They're trying to meet. And that's where the kamma will be there. The joining of the kamma. Once these two meet, hence the person is going to be stuck with the bill of kamma, the vipaka, that they have to deal with. So it's all causality when you carefully look at it. So it takes away all the mystique or mystery out of the spiritual path. That's why there is no secret in the Dhamma. There cannot be a secret in the Dhamma. Everything is wide open to be discovered by each and every one of us. When there is no desire to re-become, then birth itself ceases. And when there is no more birth, then aging, illness, and death, along with grieving, wailing, distress, torment, depression, and anguish also, altogether cease and come to their final end as a result. Just like Lord Buddha was saying in the beginning, after the causes for suffering, he said that is how the entire mass of suffering comes to be. So here is, because Lord Buddha just gave the antidote to that, he says, and this is how that entire mass of suffering comes to its end and completely ceases. Oftentimes you see monastics being questioned, interrogated, especially the new ones, by believers of other sects and things, and they come to challenge. And they usually can't do that with Lord Buddha, but they see, oh, this bhikkhu is a loner in the forest, so let's go and interrogate him. So the bhikkhu does the best that he can, let's say, and you have several examples of this in the suttas, like the one that I think we did last week. So the bhikkhu goes, and Lord Buddha, after, if the bhikkhu requires scolding or chastising, or you did well type of a statement, Lord Buddha reminds the bhikkhus that ultimately he taught two things: suffering and the ending of suffering. This is key. You do not have to know much about the Dhamma. The very first thing is, like I was saying in the beginning, is there suffering in my life right this moment? By me doing this, is this perpetuating my suffering, or is it reducing it? So this is where you're not camouflaging anything. You're not lying to yourself. You're not telling yourself, oh, I know paticca samuppada, oh, I know meditation, oh, I know metta, oh, I know this, oh, I'm practicing sati, oh, I'm practicing sila. All that could be just hogwash. All that could be simply a bunch of lies. When the person looks with scrutiny, scrutiny is extremely important. Dhamma vichaya means you are no longer siding on your side, meaning you're not placing yourself in the position of a counselor or an attorney representing you in this situation or in reference to the Dhamma. No, you are seeing it for what it is. You're being truthful. And that is what's missing. Because that person, this about whom this talk is being given, the Assutavā Sutta, the unlearned believes that he or she is quite learned. That's the problem. They don't say, you know what, I think I'm wrong, or I could be wrong. That is a phrase you will never hear them say. And that's why they're stuck. And essentially, they don't admit that they are stuck. And that's another scenario where another life goes to waste. Now, bhikkhus, in seeing and understanding all this, the learned, noble disciple of the Dhamma experiences revulsion and becomes disenchanted with the forms he sees and experiences. He becomes disenchanted with the feelings he experiences. He becomes disenchanted with the perceptions he experiences. He becomes disenchanted with the habitual drives he experiences. He becomes disenchanted with consciousness or sense awareness he experiences through all of his sense doors. So all five aggregates. He doesn't let any one of them slip by without carefully looking with scrutiny and saying, am I still delighted to have this? These people that I hang out with, does my heart kind of jump in place in excitement, even silently, quietly? Or that topic that they're discussing, do I want to jump in? Or do I endeavor, seek out that kind of enjoyment over there because it makes me feel this way? All of these scenarios mean this person doesn't have any clue about truly being disenchanted with the five aggregates. Why? Because they are still seeking pleasure. There is such a thing as seeking pleasure from company, from different environments, things that are familiar to you. That means you're still using them as your crutches. They're still delighting. And we're still far. Why? Because that means life is giving us sufficient joy, sufficient juice to want us to stick around for another life. I keep mentioning the importance of Samvega, the urgency. What is Samvega for? Samvega doesn't mean for you to go out and run for looking for another experience. Don't worry. The seamstress has a head start already. Craving is always, running in the heart. It always is seeking. What we do need, however, is to look at, why am I doing this? I keep dragging myself from one samudaya to the next, from one lollipop to the next, from one empty promise to the next. There is no disenchantment there. Now, what many people do and have done and will continue doing is by going on retreats, this and that, and or reading the suttas, or practicing meditation even, and looking at it as another achievement, as another upadhi. There's nothing to collect. You cannot collect anything. It's impossible. So the person is full of avidya to maintain that delusion. That's why Lord Buddha uses another word for that. He calls it moha. As a result of all these experiences fading in their luster for him, and with the ever-increasing expansion of his disenchantment, he becomes dispassionate. Not passionate, dispassionate. If you're still noticing that there's a strong passion in you towards anything, that's not Dhamma. And with lust and passions altogether having lost their influence on him, his heart becomes finally released. Released from what? We keep hearing that. Vimutti, vimutti. Moksha, moksha. From what? Liberated from what? Freed from what? From that constant state of agitation. From being full of inner discontent. And not trying to look for ways to sedate yourself anymore is a first start, is a good start towards actually releasing yourself. And no one can do that. So there's no faith as such in Buddhism that tells you if you believe in the Buddha or if you believe in this teacher or that, that is going to go away. It's going to replace your gaining of understanding through your life. So it can easily be a replacement for that. Don't worry, believe in this teacher or that. You have entire traditions of Buddhism in Theravada. They are teacher worshippers. This Ajahn, that Sayadaw, this, that, who cares? Ultimately, the Sayadaw or that Ajahn, if they were truly Arahants, truly, if they were, they've done their job. That's it. Their mission is accomplished as far as they're concerned. You're stuck, however. The person is stuck. So Lord Buddha never appreciated that, never cared for that, never advised that. And that's where we have the Dhamma, because many people go through the motions and consider themselves learned, Assutava, not Assutava, in the Dhamma. No, you're not. Why? You can only answer that ultimately when you look into your life and see if there is dukkha or not, if there is ignorance or not. If you catch the sankharas in mid-action, in mid-sentence, guess what? You're pretty close. If you catch craving as it's trying to stitch one vijnana with the other, you're close. Or maybe you're already an arahant. That's why we study the suttas, so that we can do close scrutiny of ourselves, not hide, not camouflage anything. Because the Dhamma is a light source. It's Lord Buddha, when he was asked How many sources of brilliance or luminance are there by a deva? Lord Buddha said, there are 4. There cannot be 5. First is the sun that gives its radiation, it gives its light to everything in all directions. Second, he says, there's the moon that lights up, glows its luminescence throughout the night, showing the path to travelers in the dark. Then he says there's the fire that can light the darkness. And then he says there's the fire of wisdom that shines the brightest. Nothing could cover that. Nothing could extinguish that. But that can arise only within each and every one of us if we work on it, each of us. And that's what the Dhamma is. In another sutta in the Samyutta Nikāya, Lord Buddha, instead of using the term wisdom, he uses himself as the light. And if you know the suttas, if you're following along, you also know that Lord Buddha also said oftentimes, he who sees the Dhamma sees me, the Tathagata. He who sees the Tathagata sees the Dhamma. That is the 4th source of light, the Dhamma itself. But we cannot sully it with our concepts and ideas as we rush back, scurry around, back to whatever is familiar and hide ourselves as we give ourselves the tiny little bits that we've tasted here and there, but we never digest it and call that Dhamma practice and call ourselves learned. No, we're not. We're in the mires of delusion, and there goes another life. And don't be surprised next time you come around, you'll be an animal, because you've kept yourself in delusion as you were alive, even while you were studying and going like a bookworm through the suttas. The only way you can release yourself from such cycles of samsara is by attaining at the very least the first stage of awakening. That can guarantee it. That can lock you in. Because you see, it's not a position, it's not a title, it's not a membership to a special club. No. Because you have right view. No one can convince you otherwise. You will know what is Dhamma from what is adhamma. And that is why it's heartbreaking to see so many teachers out there claiming to be practicing, claiming to be teaching the Dhamma. Even within this tradition, especially in this tradition, because everyone else, I don't consider them Dhamma. Still, so far, there's such a big abysmal distance between what is Dhamma and what is being practiced. And one of the best ways is by you looking at with scrutiny to your own practice, your own experience, and compare them with the Dhamma in the suttas. And not be afraid, to be humble, to say, you know what, I was wrong, to say that, you know what, I didn't know, to say that, yeah, I could learn, I could grow. That's why the bhikkhus were there. Even the arahants who were there, the chief disciples, Venerable Sariputta, Venerable Mahamoggallana, they were sitting right next to Lord Buddha. They were arahants. You can say first tier arahants. But they couldn't wait for Lord Buddha to be giving a Dhamma talk for them to be there. They didn't want to miss out. There's a certain beauty there in that humility that keeps giving, that keeps growing, that keeps burning bright. Now, when his heart is thus released and liberated, there dawns in him, and for the first time ever, the very knowing, it is indeed liberated. At that instant, the learned noble disciple of the Dhamma knows for himself, with certainty unparalleled, and through his direct understanding, that Birth is now finally destroyed. The holy life has been fully lived, with its true goal finally achieved. Now there is no more coming back to any state of becoming. Sad, sad. Great sutta that takes us back to the reminds us of the importance of the paticca samuppada, because it is very difficult to live in this body, in this world, being subject to name and form, specifically to what is being brought in constantly with the six senses. Constantly. And if you lose sight of what is happening, meaning if you drop the ball, if you drop sati, then you're in Mara's palms. You are basically saying goodbye to another life, another possibility of attaining. Who knows how many times we've come this close? Who knows how many times we've really been practicing the Dhamma, but given up halfway? Now, we have another chance. So I will pause here and see if there are any comments, questions. Might be there. So this really, I chose this sutta because it helps to shake us into action. Action, at least to kind of jolt us a little bit, to shake off the dust, because we can be complacent, and that's on the path. It is bound to happen sooner or later. Complacency, where we think, yeah, I got this, yeah, I know this, yes. Because it takes effort. It takes effort. But when we get to a point, we pass the point of no return, as it were, then it's not as hard. It's your nature, because you see it all the time. You understand samudaya, and you also understand nirodha. And there's a deep sense of karuna that arises, deep sense of metta that arises. And it doesn't need extra energy from you, because you're just full of that, because you see how this is incessant. It's constant. So long as you have this body, the five aggregates are there, this is going to happen. So may we practice with more resilience, with more engaged attitude, with more curious scrutiny, but with humility at the same time, and to learn and to understand the Dhamma, and to just look at the ceasing portion of each experience. And out of 1,000,000 that happen in a minute, you might catch one. That's still wonderful. That one will be 2. Then it will be 5. It will be 7, etc., etc. So, if there are no questions or comments, then let us transfer some merits. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika Punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desana. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika. Punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mamparanti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Take your practice outside the bounds of rites and rituals. Dhamma is not rites and rituals. It'll burn it. It'll burn the bounds. It'll burn the chains of our complacency if we give it a chance. So may you give the Dhamma a chance to shine. And arahantship is your next stop. Lord Buddha made that guarantee. I'm not making anything up. And this life gives you that chance. And what a wonderful, wonderful opportunity it is. What a great privilege it is to be alive in a human body where the Dhamma is still alive. And let it stay alive and achieve the highest Dhamma provides in this very life for yourself and everyone else at the same time. Sukhi hotu. Until next time.